Okay, here we are for lesson 6, rules for addition and adding more than 2 numbers. Okay. Remember how in last lesson we used a number line to help us perform these additions and subtraction? So on this number line, let's add -1 and -2. So we're going to start with -1, and to that we're going to add -2. So we start at -1 and we add -2. But remember, the -2 means go to the left. So 1, 2. So that means -1 plus a -2 equals -3. On the same number line, we're going to show the addition of 1 and 2. So we have this over here. We start at 1, 2, 3, 4. And the positive 2 this time means go to the right. So that means 1 plus 2 is 3. And we confirm both of those on our number line. The problem is that we can't always use number lines to do these additions for us. So what we need to do is come up with a rule for numbers that have the same sign. For instance, back here, we did -1 plus -2. We did 1 plus 2. Okay, so to algebraically add two numbers with the same sign, we add the absolute values and use the sign that were on the numbers for the sums. So 4 plus 2, the absolute value of 4 is 4. The absolute value of 2 is 2. 4 plus 2 is 6. And the sign was positive, so this is a positive 6. That's an easy first example. Here's our second example. -2 plus -3. Notice they're both positives. We're going to use the absolute value of these numbers and add normal. So -2, the absolute value of that is 2. The absolute value of -3 is positive 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. Now, that's not our final answer yet because we have to come back and look at these signs. What was the sign that was on here? Well, it was a negative. So our answer needs to be a -5 for this. So -2 plus a -3 gives us a -5. 4 plus 5, everyone knows that's 9 because the absolute value of 4 is 4. The absolute value of 5 is 5. Add them together, you get a 9. Here's our last example. -6 plus a -2. Absolute value of -6 is positive 6. Absolute value of -2 is positive 2. 6 plus 2 is 8. But don't forget, we have to go back and look at the sign. So since it was negative on both of these, our answer has to be negative. Okay? Let's go to the next page. And talk about rules whenever the signs do not match. We'll show the addition of -1 and 2 on the number line. So we start at -1 and we add 2. Notice that we're going in the positive direction because this is a positive 2. So here's 0, here's 1, here's 2. So we're going to 1, 2. And we end up at positive 1. So -1 plus 2 equals positive 1. We could also show that 1 plus a -2 will give us a -1. We'll start here and go backwards 2 because of this negative sign. So 1 plus a -2 yields -1. Okay, we need a rule for adding numbers that have different signs. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the absolute values and the numbers again. We're going to subtract small from the big and then use the sign that was on the bigger number for our answer. So here we go. The absolute value of -4 in our first example is 4. The absolute value of 1 is 1. And remember, we're going to subtract these two. So 4 minus 1 is 3. Now, what was the sign on the bigger number? Well, 4 was bigger than 1, and the sign on that was negative. So the answer to this problem will be -3. And we could show that on a number line. If you start with -4 and go to the right 1, you end up with -3. Remember, absolute values, subtract the small from the big, and use the sign that was on the big number. So here we have 2. Absolute value of 2 is 2. And we're going to take the absolute value of negative 3 and get a 3. Scratch out that sign there for a second. Okay, now we're going to take the big one, subtract the small one. So 3 minus 2 equals 1. And what was the sign on the bigger number? Well, 3 is bigger than 2. The sign on the 3 was negative. So this is a negative 1. All right. Here we have 4 plus a negative 5. We're going to take the big number and subtract the small number, but the absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 5 is 5 minus the absolute value of 4, which is 4. This yields a 1. But what was the sign on the bigger number? Well, 5 had a negative on it, so this answer needs to be negative 1. Here's our last example. Negative 6 plus 2. We have absolute value of negative 6, which is 6. The absolute value of 2, which is 2. Subtract them, you get a 4. But the bigger number was negative, so our answer is negative 4. And that's just a quick way to subtract and, actually add numbers that have different signs without using a number line. Okay, sometimes we have more than one number that we need to deal with. And the way we're going to take care of that is just treat each pair of numbers as their own individual problem. Let's look at number 1. We have negative 3 plus negative 2, and we'll ignore these two down here for the time being. Negative 3 and negative 2, they both have the same sign, so we're going to add these and then use the negative sign. So this is really 3 plus 2, which is 5, and then put negative on the 5. Now let's copy down everything we haven't used yet. All right, now it's negative 5 plus 2. Let's still ignore this 5 here. Negative 5 plus 2. These signs are different. Since they are different, this is a subtraction problem. So 5 minus 2 is 3, but the bigger number had a negative. So negative 3 and then plus 5. Again, these signs do not match. So this is a subtraction problem once again. 5 minus 3 is 2, and the bigger number was positive. So the final answer to this whole problem is a positive 2. Whoops, there we go. Our next example we'll do is number 2. Treat each problem as its separate little individual problem with a single sign in between two numbers. So 4 plus a negative 3. These signs do not match, so this is subtraction. 4 minus 3 is 1. The bigger number was positive, so this is a positive 1. And recopy everything we haven't used yet. 1 plus 2, that's an easy one, that's 3. Plus negative 6. Finally, these signs do not match, so this is subtraction. 6 minus 3 is 3, and the bigger number had a negative on it, so our final answer is negative 3. Okay, what I would like for you to do is try numbers 3 and 4 on your own, and we will use those to begin our next class. We will continue this lesson on the next video.